We will kick off this part by learning how to cultivate and project authentic confidence from Cara Hale Alter. Relying on 20 years of research, Cara has a deep understanding of how nonverbal communication shapes the perception of leadership presence. In addition to writing the critically acclaimed The Credibility Code, Cara founded SpeechSkills, a communication training company, and has provided training and lectures on projecting credibility and confidence in companies like Google and Wells Fargo, at schools such as Harvard and UC Hastings, and at numerous top 100 law firms. Please join me in welcoming Cara Hale Alter.
Thank you. All right, great. Hello, everyone. I am really excited to be here today because I love this type of event. I honestly believe that our world is going to be a better place when we have more women in positions of power and influence. And it's conversations like this, it's days like this, that create a little momentum in the right direction. At first, my conversation with you is going to look like it's about public speaking because I will admit that I am up on a stage in presenter mode and you are in audience mode out there. But really, this is about the image that you project. And that can be one-on-one or around the conference room table. And certainly standing up to give a presentation, this will help you with your presentation skills. It's just that I want this to be broader than that. I hope that you will find this information valuable and useful the second you walk out the door today, as opposed to the next time that you give a presentation, which may not happen on a daily basis. But this is about inspiring confidence in your abilities, helping other people to immediately recognize your value and your potential. There are some people who just in the way that they carry themselves, you immediately have faith in their abilities. And one person might do it with a big, bold, dynamic style, and then somebody else might do it with a very calm, grounded, down-to-earth style. But whatever the style, you just trust that they can get the job done, whatever the job may be. And then there are some people who are on the opposite end of that spectrum, and I say that they suffer from invisible credibility. And that is that they really are smart, capable people, many times experts in their field, but for some reason, that's just not immediately apparent from the outside. The fallacy is that these types of assessments that we make about other people, whether it's a positive assessment or a negative assessment, the fallacy is that our assessments are based on very subjective material, very nuanced or indefinable criteria. But I have spent the last 20 years of my life researching how human beings assess other human beings, and the bottom line is that there really are ground rules. There are metrics. Certain behaviors lead to very predictable assessments on the part of the listener. So if you can better understand how certain behaviors lead to certain perceptions, you can just be more in charge of the image that's coming across on the other side. Are you aware that certain facial expressions are hardwired into us? So not all facial expressions, but core facial expressions like fear, joy, grief, anger. And it's why we can read certain facial expressions across cultures, or why babies can read facial expressions at a really young age. Well, the same thing is true for your body language signals. A significant portion of your body language signals are what we call universal. So they are how human beings assess other human beings. And I'll give you an example of one right now. So the position of my head in space tells you a great deal of information about me. And keeping your head level, so to literally being level-headed, is a show of confidence across the globe. Now, whether you should show confidence or not, that is actually a value system. That can shift from culture to culture or situation to situation. There may be some situations where being deferential would be a better way of doing business. But if you wanted to show that you were confident, keeping your head level would be a key signal to send that message. And just to show you how predictable it is, if I raise my chin just a little bit, yeah, now this is a very high status position to be in. And if I continue to speak to you with my chin just a little bit high, you are very likely to find me a little condescending, a little arrogant. You can see that, right? But the opposite is true too. If I lower my chin, this is a very low status position to be in. And if I continue to speak to you with my chin just a little bit low, you are very likely to find me a little shy or deferential, and especially if I tilt my head. Now, whether or not I personally am aware of what my head is doing, because sometimes that's actually what the problem is, you don't know what your own head is doing, but whether or not I am aware of what my head is doing, it's still having an impact on your side. And even on your side, you're not consciously aware of what behavior is sending the message. It happens really, really fast in there. If I had started today with my chin up like this, and I said, "Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to speak with you," you would all begin to make an assessment of me really quickly. And your exact adjective would be up to you. But you would all be leaning in the same direction. But it's very doubtful that any one of you would have identified that it was my chin that was bothering you. I mean, you wouldn't leave afterwards and say, "Hey, you know what? Cara was okay, but her chin, it's just so high." So you'd just be stuck with your assessment of me. And so that's why it's my job as the speaker, as the communicator, to be very aware of the signals I'm sending out, because they're having an impact, whether I'm aware of them or not. Now, there are a lot of signals, cues that people can be taking in about you. Your image is a composite of all of your observable cues working together. So one particular behavior is not going to make or break the deal out there. So there are a lot of cues that are going on, and we can admit that not all of the observable cues are within your active control. And so for me personally, my age, my ethnic background, my gender. So these can be having some influence over your perception of me. And even what we would consider to be trivial things, like how tall someone is, or perceived attractiveness. So this can have an influence over how someone perceives you. But there are numerous powerful behavioral cues. And unless someone has a really deep prejudice, those behavioral cues will outweigh the more trivial cues. And what I mean by that is if the person across from you gets the impression that you can solve their problem, that you can handle the situation, they don't care how tall you are. And they don't care your gender. They want their problem solved. And so that's really the trick, where we're going in this conversation, making sure that the number one message that's coming across is, yes, you are fully capable of handling the situation, whatever the situation may be. Now, the title of my conversation is Cultivating Authentic Confidence. But I want you to know I'm not going to talk at all about your mindset, getting your head in the right place. And I'm not going to talk at all about how you feel about yourself. We're going to talk about skills, behaviors that you have some active control over that will raise your status. I have a very, very firm belief, as a matter of fact, as part of my tagline in my company, SpeechSkills. SpeechSkills, we focus on skills, because when you build a strong skill set, an authentic mindset of confidence follows. When you know that you look good, when you know that you have skills on your side, you just feel authentically powerful. And so you step up your game, you take more risks. And so that's where we're going. Build your skills to build your mindset and your confidence. So I'm going to take a deep dive into very specific skills. I'm going to start with what I consider to be the basics. These are those behaviors you need to cultivate in order to get basic level adjectives where someone might describe you as comfortable, competent, capable, credible. I mean, of course, you want that as your baseline. Then we'll move into what I call the bonus points. What if being described as capable and competent it's not enough for you? You would prefer much higher level adjectives like compelling, persuasive, dynamic, charismatic. Okay, what do you need to do to get that level of adjective to come across? And believe it or not, it's just not quite as nebulous as we think it is. Oftentimes it has to do with having a balance between being authoritative on the one side to being approachable on the other. And all of us, when it comes to this spectrum, are just naturally comfortable somewhere in there. But the best communicators of all know how to do both. And I mean at the same time, not waffle back and forth. Be both authoritative and approachable at the same time. It sometimes happens that we accidentally lean a little too heavily in one direction or the other. And then that's when we get negative pushback, where people say that we, euphemistically, we are too authoritative. Those are the nice words they use, but there are other ways they describe that. Or too approachable. And we sometimes will just then waffle back and forth and not know, well, okay, how do I be more effective out there? So toward the end of this conversation, I'll be explicit. Let me give you a quick preview. Okay, so here's what it's like to lean a little too heavily in one direction or the other. If you're using a lot of authoritative behaviors, and I just kicked into a few more of them right now, you are very likely to come across as capable, competent, and expert. But if you rely too heavily on these behaviors, you could also come across as unreceptive or inflexible. And that doesn't help you create a relationship with the person that you want to do business with. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you are using a lot of approachable behaviors, and I just kicked into a few more of those right now, well, you're very likely to come across as interactive, personable, maybe even dynamic. But if you rely too heavily on these behaviors, you could also come across as a lightweight. Nice, but easily dismissed. So you really do need to have a balance between both sides. And if you personally know that you need to bolster up one end of that spectrum or the other, toward the end of this conversation, I'll be explicit as to what behaviors you might want to prioritize in order to get that better balance. And then somewhere along the way, I'm going to give a little bit about flexing your courage muscle. We've heard a lot about showing confidence out there, and I believe that truly what creates confidence is stretching your boundaries, forcing yourself to take little risks along the way so that you get comfortable, taking up more space, both metaphorically as well as physically. And so we'll talk a little bit about flexing your courage muscle. All right, let me just dive in. So the three pillars that hold up your appearance of credibility and confidence are strong posture, strong voice, and strong eye contact. Strong posture, strong voice, strong eye contact. If you are doing those three things, you are going to look good. Now, almost everybody has heard that advice before, so I do not expect that to be brand new information to you. But I will say this. Almost everyone severely underestimates just how important and how powerful these behaviors are. And sadly, almost everyone overestimates how well they do these behaviors. And so let me be explicit. Strong posture means that if you're standing up, your weight is balanced equally over both feet. Whether you're standing or you're seated, your spine and your shoulders form a T, and this is like a metal T-bar. It has literal core strength. There's no wishy-washy going on here in my spine. So notice what happens to my appearance of leadership presence as soon as I allow a little flexibility in my spine. So your core has literal core strength. And then your head moves independently on your shoulders, and it's kind of like a camera on a tripod, which means I can look over here, and I can look over here, and I can look over here. What is not happening? This. So you see how that would undercut my appearance of personal gravitas. Also, nose and eyes need to track in the same direction. They need to align, which means that when I look at you, my nose points directly toward you. And if I look at you, my nose points directly toward you. Notice what happens. Oh, great. Get a good picture of this one. Yeah. Okay. What not to do. So, but notice what happens to my appearance of personal power if I let my eyes and nose move a little bit more independently. Well, I'm very likely to look uncomfortable. But I could also look sneaky or mischievous or judgmental or skeptical. Have you heard the phrase, looking out the corner of your eye at someone? Yes, so what does that mean? Kind of questioning or reticent. So if you want to come across as straightforward, you have to be literally straight on with the person that you're speaking to. Now, there's a form of communication that's called marked and unmarked communication. And what we're trying to do is to unmark our nonverbal communication so that people will really hear the power of our words. Sometimes what we are doing, the way we are delivering a message, actually sends an undercurrent that negates the power of our words. So we're trying to unmark our nonverbal communication so people will hear what we have to say. And I'll give an example of this with the skills that I just outlined. I was working with this group of teenagers in a job placement program, and one of the young women in the group said, she said, "Teachers say that I show attitude." And I don't get what they mean by that. I really don't feel like I show attitude. But she said it like this. Teachers say that I show attitude. And I don't get what they, yeah, okay, straighten it out. So when I'm looking at you this way, I'm just looking at you. This is unmarked, I'm just talking to you. As soon as I do something like this, you get a little attitude. And if you think about it, a plane in space, its tilt is called its attitude, or a ship on the sea, its tilt is called its attitude. It does not take very much attitude in order to send a message. You are very central to me right now. I'm going to look directly at you. So right now I am looking just straight on toward you, unmarked, just looking at you. If I take my nose ever so slightly to the side, you get a little attitude. So if you take anything away from this part of this conversation, take this. If you want someone to describe you as having a strong spine and a level head, you need to have a strong spine and a level head. And if you want someone to describe you as being straightforward and direct, you actually have to be straight on with the people you're speaking to. Now, if you got the impression in that conversation that I'm asking you to be stock still, then that would also be a problem, because owning space, owning territory, is another key signal of leadership presence. So whereas your core provides the solidity, your hands, your facial gestures create the fluidity or the interactivity, and both are vital. They're like two sides of the same coin. Now, hand gestures are hardwired into us. They are a form of communication that's just deeper and older than verbal communication, and even blind people will gesture when they speak, so it's not even necessarily something that we learn visually. But here's what's most interesting about hand gestures. Hand gestures are an unconscious communication process. So what that means is that when you're not thinking about it, your hands are very much engaged in the conversation. And as soon as you begin to think about it, as soon as you become self-conscious, you have no idea what to do with the appendages at the ends of your arms. And that's when we have a tendency to mask or lock down our hands in some way. And it is this apparent act of self-consciousness that gives away that you are nervous or intimidated in the situation. So the bottom line here is you don't have to learn how to hand gesture because you gesture hundreds upon hundreds of times throughout the day. What do you need to learn? Not to mask. Not to let yourself lock down when you are in fact nervous or intimidated. You need to own space. And the thing to do, the behavior to take on, is another literal metaphor, and that is, if you find yourself locked up, what should you do? Reach out. Literally and figuratively, reach out. Own the space in front of you, reach out, hand information out. This gesture, by the way, is the most common gesture we as human beings use when we're speaking. We hand out information. And it doesn't have to be associated with what I'm saying. It could be a welcome. I can say, hello, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. Or I can be talking about facts and figures, and I could say, the towers of the Golden Gate Bridge are 746 feet above the waterline. Makes no difference what I'm talking about. Hand it out. Own your space. Now, one quick point here. Almost always when someone gets feedback that they talk too much with their hands, almost always that's not actually what the problem is. Almost always that's someone who talks too much with her head and shoulders. So right this very second, when I'm speaking to you, you might give me feedback that I talk too much with my hands, but that's not the problem here. Right now when I'm speaking, my hands are moving about the same amount, except that my head and shoulders are level. And so it's unlikely you would give me feedback that I talk too much with my hands. So again, stillness raises status, but you also need to have some fluidity. All right, so the first pillar, strong posture. Next pillar, strong voice. There's a big difference between being technically understandable and really reaching people. And I want to hit this point pretty hard. It's where most people have a big opportunity for growth. If you were to take one of our workshops where we can give individualized feedback, we use a scale from 1 to 5 to identify where you are with any particular behavior, from just being okay to truly being exceptional. So here's that metric from 1 to 5 with volume. 1 on my scale with volume, you wouldn't be able to hear me, so actually I'm not going to demonstrate that, but 1 would mean you simply can't hear me. 2 is a bit like this, which means you have to work pretty hard at hearing me. Now you can hear me, it's just that you're doing all of the work. So this is level 2, below average volume. Level 3 is about like this. Level 3 is average. And most people, by the way, speak at average volume. It's fine. It's adequate. It's just that it's just adequate. I'm missing so many opportunities to make a connection and have influence. Level 4 is hopefully where I've been speaking all along. At this volume, I'm trying to come all the way to you. I don't expect you to do the work in this communication. So level 4 means optimal. But it's optimal for the situation. Of course, it always depends on the size of the room and the acoustics, so it's a sliding scale. But 4 on my scale means perfect for that situation without crossing the line. Level 5 is that one step too far. Where if at level 4, I was really making a connection with you, at level 5, you begin to put up boundaries. So it's a really big drop from 4, getting a perfect connection, to that one step too far, getting you the opposite of what you want. People will put up barriers. And most people intuitively know this. If you come on too strong with someone, they will put up barriers. So most people gravitate to the safety of the average zone. That is the most common mistake I see with any group that I work with, just a willingness to be average. Oftentimes, being average is a way of polite, and this is one place where we do have a gender difference, and that is there is a higher need or expectation for women to be polite in the work world than for men. So women more often than men make the mistake of hanging out in that polite zone, in that average zone. I'm never going to suggest to you that you cross the line and come on too much, but I would say it is worth your effort to figure out the difference between average and optimal. And to me, this is what leadership is all about. What Joanne was talking about, gravitas, this is where gravitas lives. It's understanding the difference between average and optimal with each one of these skills. It's worth it to calibrate that. It's not accidental that we describe someone who has great influence in the work world, or great influence in the world, as having a powerful voice. It actually takes power, physical power. The easiest thing you can do to immediately get results is to speak up. Literally, speak with a stronger voice. The final skill set I'd like to address is strong eye contact. In human communication, eye contact is vital, but in Western business, eye contact may be the #1 indicator of trustworthiness. Have you heard the phrase, "Can you look me in the eye and say that?" So to Westerners especially, it's not just making eye contact, it's holding eye contact. It's the duration of the eye contact that makes the difference. And how long to hold eye contact depends on the culture. There is a wide range of what's appropriate around the globe. But even within our cultural differences, holding eye contact about 3 to 5 seconds per person, that is considered optimal from the listener's point of view, relaxed from the listener's point of view. Here's my scale real quick. 1 on the eye contact, I am not looking at anybody. I'm sure you have seen lots of people who just don't look at the people they're talking to. So this is off the scale in the wrong direction. But level 2 eye contact is a scanning sort of eye contact. My eyes are up, but I'm not really seeing any of you. So this is below average. Level 3 eye contact, about a second or so per person. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with this level of eye contact. It's just I am missing so many opportunities to make a connection. But level 4 eye contact, hopefully I've been doing it all along. I see you out there. You know that I see you. We're having a conversation for a moment. When people feel seen, they like you better. They hold you in higher regard. They trust you more. It is so very worth it to have enough inner discipline to be able to put your focus on the people you are speaking to. I want to give a quick story here about, I finished a talk like this one time at a law firm, and a woman, an associate came up to me and she said, I want you to watch my behaviors. She said, as I was standing in front of me, she said, I really struggle with eye contact, and it's very difficult for me, but I just wanted to ask you, do you really think it's that important? Because I don't think it's held me back. And I thought, oh, hon. It has. She might be brilliant enough to have gotten to where she is because of her legal brilliance, true, but there is no question in my mind she wouldn't have traveled further if she had the ability to make stronger eye contact. So I'm just going to encourage you to build the skill set, strong posture, strong voice, strong eye contact. Let me say about strong eye contact, not going too far with eye contact, it doesn't mean more than 3 to 5 seconds. It almost always has to do with a lack of interactivity or facial fluidity. So let me just put on a poker face for a second. Even in this situation, if I don't have any interactivity, 3 to 5 seconds is a very long time to look at someone. But if I'm looking at you and my hands are engaged and my face is fluidly engaged, I can actually look at you for a long time before it becomes uncomfortable because there's this subtextual conversation going on. So almost always too much eye contact where it becomes weird, creepy, aggressive is just a lack of other signals that aren't accompanying the eye contact. Okay, I have put this skill set in this order for a very specific reason. Strong posture, biggest bang for your buck. Easiest thing to do, has a huge impact out there. Strong voice, all right, a little more difficult to cultivate this as a habit, so worth it. Again, have a powerful voice, be a powerful voice. And then strong eye contact. I consider this to be the big differentiator. Once you have the other two in place, your ability to really focus on the people in front of you and really see them, that's when they're going to describe you with superlatives. So now you have the skill set. There are a couple things I don't have time to go into, but a couple behaviors that tend to undercut your credibility. Too many fillers, you know, kind of, sort of, actually, basically, I mean, right, okay, like. So try to avoid those excessive fillers. And then the misplaced upward inflection, where you have a little question mark at the end of your sentence, but be very careful to use downward inflections. A downward inflection says, I mean what I say. You can count on this. The upward inflection, if I were to say the same things, I mean what I say, you can count on this. It doesn't quite have the same land. So make sure to use downward inflections, try to eliminate fillers. Now, moving on to flex your courage muscle. One of the problems that we experience is that we often will practice our skill set under perfect conditions, and then we are very disappointed in ourselves when we underperform under difficult or stressful conditions. And so in order for you to learn how to manage stressful situations, to learn how to handle higher stakes conversations, you're going to need to seek out some adrenaline-inducing situations. You're really going to have to practice or train for the conditions. And so I have a tool to help you do that, and I call it the BOSS checklist. BOSS stands for Building on Small Successes. This checklist, and you can download it at my website for free, this checklist is a series of progressively more difficult communication tasks. They start out really easy, like no-brainer easy, as in ask a question. Ask a question of the person next to you. But you can also raise the bar on any single skill. Ask a question of the intimidating-looking security guard at the airport. Ask a question in a town hall meeting where you have to stand up and use a microphone. Ask a question of a thought leader that you respect tremendously. So you can take any particular skill and make it harder and harder. Also, ask for an accommodation. Ask for some special treatment. It can be as easy as a different table at a restaurant or something that grows from there. Here's the thing about the BOSS checklist. You can't check something off the list unless you have decided to do it ahead of time and then you followed through. You can't look at the list and think, oh, that's easy, I do that all the time. And that's because it is often the anticipation and the planning of the task that creates the adrenaline and the self-consciousness. It's not the thing itself, and it's that adrenaline and self-consciousness that we're trying to master. So few of you would have any difficulty whatsoever if you go into a restaurant and you're shown this table over here and you prefer this one, saying, oh, can I have this one? But deciding before you go in that restaurant, no matter what table they show you, you will ask for a different one. It creates a very different level of self-consciousness. So this is one way you can take risks. Take risks, but small steps along the way. And please do not underestimate how the simple tasks, just by doing them on purpose, can create some adrenaline. So start easy and move your way forward. I want to give you one quick example of how I played this game myself. So I do have a certain inner discipline that says if the only thing holding me back from doing a particular behavior that would be good for me is my personal discomfort, then I should do it. And so I do a lot of traveling for my business, and I was sitting in a restaurant somewhere out in the world by myself having dinner, and over in the distance there was a party having a birthday. And so the waiters went over there and they sang happy birthday and they circled around and they shook their maracas. And when I looked at that, I thought to myself, I wonder what would happen if I asked them to sing happy birthday to me. I'm by myself. And as soon as I thought that thought, my face flushed red, my heart started to pound, and I thought, oh, no, I couldn't possibly. And then I thought, darn, now I have to do that because that is the very feeling I am personally trying to master. And so then the waiter came over to my table and I said, today happens to be my birthday and I'm traveling on my own. I'm really missing my friends and family. I'm wondering if you would be willing to sing happy birthday to me. And he was charming. He was so happy to, and he called the other waiters over and shook their maracas, and the people at the tables next to me also joined in and congratulated me. But here's what's interesting about that. For 3 or 4 days afterwards, I was on a high. I was proud of myself. And I wasn't proud because I had him sing happy birthday to me. I was proud because I had this reaction like I couldn't possibly. And I made myself do it anyway. And what was at stake? In other words, everybody else had a great time. So the only thing that was in the way there was me personally not wanting to make myself the center of attention, not wanting to ask for something. But I did it anyway. And I felt authentically empowered. So now back to my conversation about authentic confidence. You develop authentic confidence when you build a skill set that you believe in. And by the way, you have control over building that skill set. You can put in the practice time every single day. It does not take talent to learn to point your nose towards someone. It doesn't take talent to eliminate uhs and ums from your language. I will say it takes some discipline, it takes some follow-through, it takes some practice, the very qualities that reward us in the work world, as a matter of fact. But so it does take some follow-through, but it doesn't take talent. You are in charge of owning those skill sets. And the second way you can build authentic confidence is stretch your limits just incrementally every single day. Or anytime you have that little thought that comes up, I'm uncomfortable with that. As long as it's not offending anyone else or making other people uncomfortable, you should do it, just as a matter of discipline. All right, the balance between authority and approachability. If you personally know that you need to bolster up your authoritative side, what behaviors would you want to prioritize? Learn to take up space. Maintain direct eye contact. Keep your head level. Try to be still. Use strong volume and resonance in your voice and downward inflections. All of those behaviors bolster your appearance of authority without deflating your approachability. Those are just good skills to have on your side, no pushback. Now, on the approachable side, if you know you need to work on this side, what should you focus on? Well, maintain direct eye contact. This is a double bonus, that as long as your face isn't locked into some sort of poker face, strong eye contact increases your authority and increases your approachability. But other behaviors that raise your approachability, interactive gestures, interactive facial gestures, lots of expression in your voice, and then the ability to elicit a response, and that means you include other people in your conversation. One-on-one, it's easy because you could ask questions. But in a situation like this, I'm including you by really seeing you and acknowledging you with my body language. We're present with one another. Of those two lists, I am trying to do all of those behaviors at the same time. I'm hoping that you would find it difficult to decide if I am more authoritative or more approachable on this topic. But depending on the situation, I can lean one direction or the other, depending on what's needed in the communication. The problem exists when you're trying for one of those attributes, but you're using negative behaviors. And you can actually find this information in a handout on my website as well. But that, for example, emphatic gesturing, this with my head or with my hands, yeah, it increases my authority, but it completely undercuts my approachability. And on the other end of the spectrum, bobbing my head when I speak and using upward inflections, that does increase my approachability, but it completely undercuts my authority. So there are certain behaviors that we can try to use to get those attributes, but they either negate each other or they actually create a negative response. So I'm going to encourage you to focus on those positive behaviors. The people you interact with, they want you to have a nice balance between authority and approachability. They want you to have strong communication skills. All right, so I think I've covered everything that I said that I would talk about. I want to give you one quick story, and then I'm off the stage. This is a true story. When my kids were little, I played with them in the morning and took them off to preschool. That day, as I went around and did all my errands, it's like the world was in a fantastic mood, and everywhere I went, people seemed overjoyed to see me. And like magic dust had been sprinkled over the earth. And then I went home, and I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and I had forgotten that when I was playing with the kids in the morning, I had drawn a kitty nose and whiskers on my face. Yeah. And I had gone to, nobody had mentioned it all day long. I'd been to the dry cleaner and the bank and the grocery store and Starbucks. Nobody had mentioned it. Now, why do you think nobody mentioned it? They thought it was intentional. They thought I knew. I mean, so obvious a signal could not have been accidental. So this brings me to a very important, my final takeaway, and that is, you cannot trust that you're going to get outside feedback. You have to seek out outside feedback because people assume that you know, and even if they thought you didn't know, it might be embarrassing for them to be the one to bring it up. So if you want to raise your level of skills, by all means, seek outside feedback with a video camera, with your friends, with your colleagues. Ask for ways in which you could raise your game. All right, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Good luck out there. Thank you.